And that can be beautiful. I mean, the pictures given of that in the literature, in 19th century novels, for example, are often very moving. And often you think, yes, it is beautiful both for the person who's doing it and also for, as a spectacle for others around.
I think there's also a problem about the monolithic concept of justice, because it implies that you don't actually have conflicting interests within social groups and now species groups, and that you can be just to one without being unjust to another. And maybe there is such a view of the world, but I would frankly be terrified of it, because I think we have to understand that conflict is what we're geared for, bred for, programmed for, and that peace is what we're bad at. And that what one wants to do, in some senses, is to contain the conflict and have it manageable. This is why I was interested in the assumption that it would be pleasure or harmony or something that made life worth living, because it seems to me that life is essentially conflict. And one of the questions we're asking is whether the conflict is worth the collateral damage. And what I would say is that there is no alternative. The only alternative is to opt out, which in my terminology is no alternative at all. I don't regard the cessation of life as an option, as an equivalent to the continuation of life, which is why I took the line that I did in the beginning, that life is what is and not life is what isn't, and all you can do is leave the system. And that's why, in a way, it's not worth discussing whether the system is worth continuing in view of the fact it is the only system. But we seem to have fundamentally different notions. If one would think that what would justify our existence would be the thought that we could bring this thing called justice to all suffering creatures, then we're on a hiding to nothing. It's not going to happen.
But I think that justice implies the absence of conflict. I mean, actually, I think you would have no point for an account of justice unless you have pervasive conflicts. Aristotle said it was silly to think of the gods paying deposits and making contracts and things of this sort. I mean, for beings to have justice if they don't have conflict makes no sense. Justice is a reasonable way of adjudicating the pervasive conflicts that everyone has for resources and opportunities and so on.
What Germaine said, we have different notions. I'm not sure that's true. That's true. But what we have much more, and it doesn't come out, we have different desires.
Yeah. And there's a scarcity of things. There's a scarcity of food and a scarcity of shelter. And we have to find some way of arranging life so that we all get a fair share.
Some people desire excitement. Roger, I desire the same thing. I mean, the most pleasurable thing for me is that everything is totally ordered. There's nothing, and still you have the desire that something might change, but within that order, so that actually the change is observable and not too sudden.
But that's funny, because when you were talking about days being perfectly predictable, I mean, to some of us that meant utter boredom. Jesus, I hope something surprising happens today. And amongst the things that happen is you trip over a pavement and it split your kneecap, you know.
Yes, you go to the hospital and you meet somebody.
Well, first of all, life cannot be ordered in this way. And secondly, if we were talking about something ordered in that way, we wouldn't be talking about life as we live it, because it's full of potential catastrophe.
In the entire literature, everything is, it starts with chaos, or the idea of, and it gets into a narrative which is an order, that something happens after each other, and then things come together and they cross, and there's a complex. It's the same in painting.
But that's art, not life.
But you know, that's why art is better than life.
But art is a part of life, so that's a nonsensical thing to say as well.
No, art is sublimation, is an old-fashioned word. Art is that thing that leads us possibly to paradise. That's what we have lost. And culture is the reconstruction of paradise. We have failed until now, but it might still be the same thing.
But I want to be sure of something. You were speaking tongue-in-cheek, weren't you, when you spoke about regularity, knowing what's going to happen next.
Slightly tongue-in-cheek.
Yes, I just wanted to be sure.
No, but I think there is a false view of human happiness which says that it consists always in change and expectation and so on. There is this other aspect of it, and it's partly a matter of temperament, but it is the case also that there are people who who are not so keen on having that constant change. And this pursuit of excitement and diversity and change is part of what causes the terrible catastrophes that Martha worries about. I mean, Pascal famously said that all of life's troubles come from man's inability to sit at home at his desk. You know, okay, it's a silly thing to say in a way, because who made that desk? But nevertheless, you can see the point of that.
You know what, listening to all these discussions, which are very interesting, but actually you are all talking about this same thing. You are just talking about what you like in life, and that's all. So you love these things and someone else loves the opposite things. It's still the same thing. You find things in life why you think life is worth living. But there is another side of it. For example, when you feel, and it happens to you, for example, you are depressed for a long time, that life is not worth living, and nothing, be it sex or books or I don't know what, friends, family, nothing causes you to feel that life is worth anything at all. Because that's how you feel when you are depressed. It's all the same. It all happens to someone else, someone on your surface. It's just some ripples on your surface and nothing else. You do not feel emotions that you should feel. You know that you are supposed. I was never deeply depressed, I believe, because then there's no way out without medicine. And I managed to get out without anything at all, through only one thing, music. And it was just, it cured me in the shortest possible time. Well, I don't know, a couple of weeks. But for about a year and a half, maybe two, because I didn't notice when it started, but I started going down in a way. I say down, it's just a metaphor. Never mind. I started feeling less and less and less. I know what I was supposed to feel, but nothing happened to me, you know? There was no joy in anything at all. I saw things the way I did. I thought the way I did. The intellect was not, you know, didn't go away. But it was a kind of strange and interesting thing to feel from inside that your intellect has nothing to do with your emotions and thus life. The intellect is something extra that is given to you, just a good instrument, but it's useless. I don't want to have it even. Even I would prefer to be absolutely dumb as a nail, so that not think about what I'm experiencing emotionally. And through music, I went out of this state. And then when it was over, I looked back and I thought, here it is. It's like a dark valley, well, twilight valley, I would say. It's not completely dark, emotional twilight. And now it's all over. Now I feel I am back. I feel the way I'm supposed to, I guess. But there is a state of mind, emotion, not mind, I guess. But this time in life, rather, when life is not worth living. But I didn't commit suicide. I did nothing of the kind. And my own question is why? Because I didn't really find anything worth living. I was indifferent. I thought, if I'm run over by the car, it will be okay. Of course, I don't want to feel pain. I want it to be instant death, but I don't mind. I really don't mind.
Your story about depression, I mean, that's dead on the point. There has to be a kind of receptivity to feeling that life is worthwhile. There's no outside thing there. There's no attitude. There's no single thing you can do to make life worthwhile. There has to be a state that's in your head that allows you to feel that life is worthwhile. The thing I was curious about with the business of depression, and I think this about people talking about is life worth living, in some degree, it seems to me that you fall into two camps. There's those who think life is worth living because of the history they've had. The life they've lived has been worth living. And then there's people who think that life is worth living because of that which is yet to come, which is into the future. And I suspect in the case of depression, neither of those is operative. Is that right? Is that what you felt?
I would say yes, but there are many different kinds of depression and many grades, I would say, of depression, as far as I know. And, well, you may feel really low or indifferent. When you look back, you know mentally that there was a wonderful life, but it's not there anymore, so it makes no difference whether it was or was not. Could be someone else's life. The life I read about in a book, really no difference. As for the future, you don't believe that this state of depression will go away.
Can I go back to Freeman Dyson's point? Actually, I was very moved by his picture. And Freeman said in response, family, children, and Germaine said, well, conflict, hatred, torture, dispute, and so on. And that was the end of that. And if we reverse the question and said, well, not, you know, if we hate life, we're going to commit suicide, but supposing we played the game about you have 1 week to live, you know, what actually would be, what you would miss, really. Missing the pleasure of children and family, that would be very high on my list, I have to say, my list of regrets. So I would just like to hear, I don't know, maybe nobody wants to talk about that, even less than about sex.
It must be, and I mean this from the heart, my fault, but I find all this deeply embarrassing. The whole occasion. Deeply embarrassing. My fault. I listened to Tatiana, very moved, and I want to know what the hell business of mine is it, your depression? None whatever. I judge the maturity of a human being by the refusal to confess. To be grown up is not to share certain things with others. I'm thinking on an occasion like this of Emily Dickinson's fantastic phrase, it is now late afternoon in the soul, late afternoon. Or perhaps a feeling of that the soul too can have jet lag, as a number of us around this table probably have. It's so bloody embarrassing, isn't it? Now, to a question like, is life worth living? Mark Twain, the journalists asked him that exact question when he landed in Liverpool, and he said, gentlemen, I've been told the alternative is worse. It's a wonderful answer. He's a very deep man. If you can say to a group of public under cameras, strangers or friends, let them be what you will, if you can phrase what to you makes life worth living, the absolute center, it's a lie. It's a lie. Because it's nobody else's business. It's a self-deception. I think it probably lies lower than speech or on the other side of speech for many human beings. It is not articulable. It is certainly not publicly communicable. And